Today we're going to continue our discussion about the different aspects of connected speech, uh, which is covered by chapter 14, the Green Book. So previously we talked about the concept of rhythm, speech rhythm, and how English is a type of language that has stress-timed rhythm. We also discussed the concept of assimilation. We discussed the two different directions of change in assimilation in English. The regressive assimilation, where the affect moves, or the direction of change moves from the second sound back to the first one. Regressive means taraju'i, from the second back to the first one. We also talked about the progressive assimilation, where the direction of change moves from the first one onward to the second one. Progressive, of course, means taqaddumi in Arabic. We also talked about the different types of change in assimilation. We saw that the types of assimilation can be divided into three main types. Assimilation of place of articulation, which we talked about previously. We also have assimilation of manner, the assimilation of manner of articulation. And you know that we have different types of consonants that have different types of manner of articulation. So we have fricative, we have stop or plosive, we have affricate, we have lateral, we have proximate, etc. The other type, the third type of change in assimilation is a type that we call assimilation of voicing, when we change the voicing of the sound from voice to voiceless, or vice versa, from voiceless to voiced. So we discussed the first one, assimilation of place of articulation. We discussed this in details, and we also tackled different examples previously. And I told you the only thing that you need to know is to understand this type of change and to memorize a single example of it. And I guess the easiest example would be the expression good boy, which in connected speech would be good boy. Good boy in in careful speech, but in connected speech, in fast speech, it would be good boy, good boy. We change the de into be at the end of the first word, the word good. Today, so this is the assimilation of place. Today we're going to talk about assimilation of manner, and as we did with the assimilation of place, we only need to understand the concept and memorize a single example of it. So let's talk about this concept, assimilation of manner of articulation. So only regressive assimilation of alveolar consonant can take place in this case, the assimilation of manner. Regressive assimilation of alveolar consonant. Regressive, it means that the direction of change moves backward from the second sound back to the first one. And it takes place only when we have alveolar consonants. Alveolar means the sound, the consonant sounds that we pronounce with the alveolar ridge. So for example, we have plosive plus fricative. In this case, the assimilation process will make the plosive fricative as well. So for example, we have te, which is a plosive, and se, which is fricative. So when we have them together, te at the end of the word and se at the beginning of next word, the te will be changed into se, as in that side. In connected speech and fast speech would be that side. The te will change into se. That side, that side, that side. So we change the te into se. Another example is that zoo, when we have te and ze, the te will change into ze. That zoo will be that zoo. That zoo without the te. We drop the te, we change it or we replace it with ze. That zoo instead of saying that zoo. Another example when we have de plus se. De, of course, is plosive, se is fricative. So the de will be changed into se as well. Good song, good song. Instead of saying good song, it's going to be good song. So the last example, in this case, we have de and ze. Bad zone will become bad zone. Bad zone. We drop the de and we change it with ze as well. So you only need to memorize a single example, and I guess that side is very easy one to remember. So that would be enough to explain this issue. The other case, so the first case when we have plosive plus fricative, and the plosive will change into the fricative, which is usually either se or ze. The second case when we have plosive plus nasal. Plosive sound plus nasal sound, and the resultant sound will be nasal as well. Because as I said here, it's a regressive assimilation only. So the effect moves backward from the second sound back to the first one. So let's take some examples. Te, which is plosive, and ne, which is nasal, and the resultant sound will be ne. That night, that night, that night. We drop the te and replace it with ne. The same case can be found in the expression good night, good night. Instead of saying good night, we say good night. We drop the de sound, and we replace it with ne. And that would be a very easy case to remember, I guess. Good night. Instead of saying good night, good night, good night. There's a very important note that you need to keep in mind, that the sound, when we have this sound, follow a plosive or nasal, either se, ze, plosive, or nasal, ne, at the end of the preceding word. So for example, we have get them, get them. It would be get'em, get'em. In the, inne, inne. So we have a very similar case when we have a change of a change in the manner of articulation. When we have the, so that would be changed into in the, inne, get them, get 'em. This is important to understand, but you don't need to memorize the example. This is not really important. The only thing that you need to remember is an example of these two cases. So I guess that side and good night would be easy examples to remember. And this is, as I said earlier, is assimilation of manner of articulation, because the change will take place in the manner of articulation. The manner of articulation. The last case, which we're going to talk about in this lecture, is assimilation of voice. And that case is very easy, and it doesn't really require any effort to understand and to memorize an example from. So assimilation of voice is usually regressive assimilation of voice. Regressive means the direction of change will move from the second sound back to the first sound. So we have the expression have to. Have to. In connected speech, when we say such an expression in a very fast speech, the ve will be turned into fe. And instead of saying have to, we say have to. I don't have to. And you can notice that the V sound was changed into V. So the voice sound V was changed into the same sound but without the voicing, which is V. V and F are very similar sounds in terms of place of articulation and manner of articulation. The only difference between these two sounds is voicing. V is voiced, F is voiceless. So when we have this case of assimilation, when we have assimilation of voice, the voiced will be changed into voiceless, just to go along with the T, which is voiceless. Because the T is voiceless, we have to change the V into a voiceless counterpart. So the V will change into F to be voiceless, just like the T sound. Have to, have to. Have to becomes have to. Another example is bad tongue. Bad tongue becomes bad tongue. Bad tongue. We change the D into T. Big car. Big car. Big car. We change the G into K because G is voiced. We change it into its voiceless counterpart, which is K. So you only need, as I said earlier, in any single case that we discussed so far, you only need to memorize a single example. And I guess the easiest example to memorize here is have to. Have to instead of saying have to, because this will require some effort, and in connected speech we usually tend to make the pronunciation easier, so we drop the voicing from the and we change it into voiceless. Fe, have to. I don't have to. You don't have to. Instead of saying you don't have to, just to make it easy for you to pronounce. Another example is the example, I like that black dog. I like that black dog. So you can see that black dog becomes black dogs. The K change into G as well. And in this case, it's not about changing the voice into voiceless. We change the voiceless into, or to make it voiced. So black is the K sound is voiceless, and then we change it into G, which is the voice counterpart of the sound K. So I like that black dog, instead of saying black dog, because that would make it difficult to pronounce. So we change the K into G just to make the two sounds go smoothly together. So this is what we have for assimilation of voicing. Usually we change the voiced into voiceless, but we also have some cases where we change the voiceless into voiced. As I said earlier, you only need to memorize a single example for each case. So by this we end our discussion.